thank the gentleman for yielding. A couple of quick points. My colleagues want to investigate crime in the urban areas, and we are deeply concerned about crime in the urban areas. But we're also concerned about crime in a lot of the suburban and rural areas. I'll have you know that in my home state of California, one of the highest murder rates happens to be not in San Francisco, not in Los Angeles, but in Bakersfield, California, home of our new speaker. The murder rate there is double the rate, at least in 2021, was double the rate in New York City. It was double the rate in the San Francisco district of the former speaker, and it's almost double the rate of my area in Los Angeles. Governor Gavin Newsom of California has referred to one county in California as the murder capital of California. It has held that title for 5 straight years. It's not LA County, it's not San Francisco County. Sadly, tragically, the murder capital of California is Kern County, the county that makes up a large swath of California's 20th district. That district belongs to the esteemed Speaker Kevin McCarthy. And so this is an issue in both urban and rural areas, and we shouldn't blind ourselves to the need to investigate crime rates everywhere. I also want to point out, again, my colleagues say that there's nothing biased in the rules they propose, no conclusions that are stated in advance, but let's look further. The proposed rules by the majority would say that we should investigate the FBI's purge of conservative agents from within its ranks. Boy, that certainly sounds like it's stating a conclusion. The rules say that we should investigate the FBI's manipulation of domestic violent extremism statistics for political purposes. Again, each of the provisions, so many of the provisions in these rules state essentially the GOP talking points they hope that this committee can somehow validate in the usual kind of ass-backwards way, where you start with the conclusion you want to reach and then essentially selectively marshal whatever misinformation you can to support a non-factual conclusion. That isn't the way this committee or any other should operate. And with that, I yield back to the gentleman.
Would the gentleman yield for question?
Yes.
You studied the rules here, I presume, the proposed rules. Is there anything in the proposed rules to discuss mass shootings and school shootings and the use of guns by young white men so often to commit these mass shootings, and the fact that Republicans, by, I believe I saw the last polls, over 75% support background checks, and yet we don't have universal background checks? Anything on that at all?
No, not that I can find. Apparently that is an issue that is not of particular concern to our colleagues across the aisle. But it is of grave concern to the vast majority of Americans who go through gun tragedy after gun tragedy. We had 4 in a row mass shootings in California. I visited Monterey Park after the terrible shooting there. And how we can blind ourselves on this committee or in this Congress to the suffering, the loss of family members. One thing I just have never understood is how members lack the basic empathy to step in someone else's shoes and understand the terrible trauma of being a victim of a mass shooting. We ought to all understand, or try to understand, how those who have suffered that horrible loss of a child or a parent or a loved one and want to do something about it and do more than give our thoughts and prayers. We ought to want to legislate in ways that are supported by the vast majority of the American people. There's nothing in the rules about this. Apparently, mass shootings aren't a problem in America. Apparently, the everyday tragedy of gun violence in our communities, whether it's a mass shooting or an individual shooting, apparently that's not of concern to this committee. They seem to have come up with ideas to investigate, conspiracy theories, but the reality of gun violence is not of interest. I yield back.
Let me ask you another question, if you yield. Is there anything in here about Article 14 to the constitutional amendment that talks about insurrectionists, people who took an oath to support the United States government, and all enemies, foreign and domestic, and who violate that, not to be able to allow to be hold office again?
Well, I don't see much interest in my colleagues across the aisle in understanding how close we came to losing our democracy, how massive numbers of people attacked this building, sent us running to a safe place, exposed police officers to extraordinary brutality that resulted in the loss of of several lives. There doesn't seem to be much interest in efforts to overturn the election,
Gentleman's
interference with the peaceful transfer of the power for the first time in our history.
Gentleman.
And I yield back.
Gentleman.